And we hear from Diana's sister, but she and others in the family are commemorating her death, speaking candidly about their grief from 20 years ago.
Decades after the People's Princess's tragic demise, there are still revelations about what might have transpired with the events leading up to her death. Her sister, Lady Sarah McCorquodale, has come forward to confirm some of the rumors. What really happened to Diana, and what were some of the challenges she had to face in her final days? Stick around as we get ready to tell you all you need to know. Princess Diana was born Diana Frances Spencer on July 1, 1961. She was the fourth of 5 children in the Spencer family, a lineage deeply rooted in British aristocracy. She grew up with 3 surviving siblings, Sarah, Jane, and Charles, while her infant brother John tragically passed away before she was born. The Spencer family was very close to the royal family. It's where Diana spent much of her early years in a grand ancestral home, Park House, on the Sandringham estate in Norfolk. But in this noble setting, Diana and her siblings still face some issues, because both of her parents, John Spencer, Viscount Althorp, and Frances Roche, had a rather rocky marriage that ended in divorce when Diana was still a child. She was very close to her siblings, though each of them had distinct personalities and paths. Among them, her bond with Sarah, the eldest, was notable in shaping certain events in Diana's life. Sarah, more formally known as Lady Sarah McCorquodale, was confident and headstrong, often acting as a guide for her younger siblings. Unlike Diana, who is very shy and warm-hearted, Sarah is more extroverted and independent. They were even very sisterly, but sometimes their relationship was defined by Sarah's strong personality. As a child, Diana received a somewhat unorthodox aristocratic education. She attended Silfield Private School and then Riddlesworth Hall, a preparatory school in Norfolk. When her parents divorced, she was taken to West Heath Girls' School in Kent when she was 9 years old. As a child, Diana had natural talents in music, ballet, and sports. Diana did not go to university, but she attended a finishing school in Switzerland, Institut Alpin Videmanet, for a short period of time before returning to England to work as a nanny and later as a kindergarten assistant. Sarah was more academic and took a different route. She was educated at the same West Heath Girls' School before continuing her studies elsewhere. It was through her social life and connections that she first became linked with Prince Charles. In the late 1970s, Sarah began dating Charles, who at the time was under growing pressure to find a suitable wife. The royal family saw Sarah as a potential match, given her aristocratic background and the Spencer family's long-standing ties with the monarchy. However, Sarah was frank and vocal, qualities that were not always characteristic of the royal family's reserve and sense of duty. When she briefly dated Charles, she famously declared to the press that she would not marry him if he were the dustman or the King of England. Such statements did not sit well with the crown, and her relationship with Charles soon ended. Interestingly, Sarah was quite proud of introducing Charles to her younger sister Diana. Later, she said she played Cupid between the two, although she never could have anticipated how important their relationship would turn out to be. Diana and Charles met in 1977 when she was just 16. At that point, Diana was just an innocent teenager, much further away from the royal pressures and expectations which would later consume her. It is said Charles found her sweet and charming but didn't get involved with her immediately. It was in the coming years that their paths would cross again, and in 1980, their relationship began to gain momentum. By 1980, Charles was still unmarried, and pressure mounted for him to find a suitable bride. The royal family saw Diana as a strong candidate. She was young, beautiful, and had no scandalous history. She was also from a noble lineage. During a summer gathering, Diana and Charles had a meaningful conversation in which Diana reportedly consoled him about the recent loss of his great-uncle, Lord Mountbatten. Charles was overwhelmed by her warmth and compassion, and within a little time, their courtship officially began. Their relationship grew fast since Charles was pressed to marry. A whirlwind romance swept up Diana, which she hardly had time for. Media obsession grew and evolved into a craze regarding the young and beautiful Diana, and she soon found herself thrust into the global limelight. On Valentine's Day of February 1981, Charles proposed to his bride-to-be with a blue sapphire, surrounded by diamonds. That ring went on to become the most recognizable jewel to come from a royal wardrobe. Diana said yes. Just 19 at the time, she hadn't a clue of what to expect. Plans began for a truly spectacular, historic royal wedding. As Diana entered the royal world, she was heavily scrutinized by the public and press, where every move of hers was examined. She stayed at Buckingham Palace in the lead-up to the wedding, an experience she later said was lonely and overwhelming. Diana and Charles wed on July 29, 1981, in what was then called the wedding of the century. The large, formal ceremony was held at London's St. Paul's Cathedral, instead of the more traditional Westminster Abbey, which would have allowed far fewer people to see the union. Around the world, 750 million watched, as thousands lined the streets of London to watch the newlyweds pass by. Diana's wedding gown was the most memorable. It was crafted by David and Elizabeth Emanuel. It was an ivory silk taffeta material and had 25-foot trains. This makes it the largest ever wedding dress, along with other lace details. People were delighted to see her walk down the aisle, and it would be talked about for generations. Despite the grandeur of the occasion, subtle signs of trouble were already present. Diana reportedly had second thoughts before the wedding, sensing that Charles was still emotionally connected to his former love, Camilla Parker Bowles. Meanwhile, Charles also had doubts, but the enormous public pressure left both with little room to reconsider. As they exchanged vows, Diana mistakenly reversed the order of Charles's names, while Charles notably omitted the traditional vow to obey his wife, a break from royal tradition. Nevertheless, their union was sealed, and Diana was officially the Princess of Wales. Following the ceremony, the newlyweds traveled through London in a grand carriage procession, waving to adoring crowds. They then appeared on the balcony of Buckingham Palace, where they shared their famous kiss, a moment that delighted the public and further solidified the fairy tale narrative that surrounded their marriage. The wedding reception was held at Buckingham Palace, attended by hundreds of guests, including foreign dignitaries and members of the aristocracy. The couple subsequently left for their honeymoon, which involved a cruise aboard the royal yacht Britannia and a stay at Balmoral Castle in Scotland. While their wedding had started with huge public interest, the foundation of the marriage wasn't so stable from the beginning. Diana, young and inexperienced in the ways of royal life, was thrust into a rigid system with overwhelming expectations, while Charles was trying to balance his duties, personal emotions, and the weight of his position as heir to the throne. Their grand wedding had been the beginning of a complex and challenging chapter, one that would shape Diana's life in profound ways. Yet for that moment, the world saw nothing but the image of a young, beautiful princess stepping into what seemed to be a dream come true. After her then relationship with Prince Charles, Sarah Spencer wed Neil McCorquodale in 1980. Neil was a member of an aristocratic family, but not nearly as famous as Charles. The marriage was a quiet and serene one, far removed from the ever-present glare that followed her younger sister Diana. Unlike Diana, Sarah managed to live a more subdued existence, and many wondered if she had actually done the right thing in leaving Charles when she did. Others wondered if she had seen a less attractive side of Charles's nature early on, one that Diana would come to know all too well from their own troubled marriage. These issues surfaced when Charles and Diana's marriage began to sour during the late 1980s and early 1990s. The outside world only saw the fairy tale facade, but behind it were simmering tensions. Charles's ongoing affair with Camilla Parker Bowles was one such tension. Although Diana did not initially realize how deep their relationship was, she came to learn that Camilla was someone that Charles was intimate with in a way beyond mere friendship. Charles became more emotionally distant, and tension within their marriage heightened. The press began to pick up on telling signs that there was something amiss with the couple. Their behavior at public events, their pursuit of individual activities, and even their occasional socialization seemed scripted. Later on, the gossip became irrefutable facts when private phone calls between Charles and Camilla were leaked in what was referred to as Camillagate. The tapes, which included Charles's wish to be reborn as Camilla's tampon, sent shockwaves among the public and solidified the impression that he never really let her go. Diana responded by showing that she was just a victim. In one of the most scandalous and inflammatory royal interviews ever, she was interviewed by Martin Bashir for a 1995 BBC Panorama special. She spoke candidly about the collapse of her marriage, famously stating, "There were 3 of us in this marriage, so it was a bit crowded." This candid acknowledgement of Charles's affair with Camilla shattered the centuries-old code of silence by the royal family about personal matters. Meanwhile, Charles himself also conducted his own interview with journalist Jonathan Dimbleby. Though he attempted to present himself in a statesmanlike fashion, he had admitted deceiving Diana. But only, he maintained, after the marriage had irretrievably broken down. These were landmark interviews by royal standards, with the future king and queen-in-waiting having put their marriage on television in front of the whole world. As Charles and Diana drifted apart from one another, rumors that Diana too had affairs began to circulate. She was constantly surrounded by other men, and the media were curious to know whom she was meeting. One of the first to be named in conjunction with Diana was James Hewitt, a British Army officer. Hewitt was hired to teach Diana horseback riding, but was rumored to have an affair with her. The rumored affair lasted a few years, and when Hewitt later wrote a book on the affair, it only helped spread gossip. Another man frequently associated with Diana was businessman James Gilby, whose sweet phone messages to Diana were taped in what the media referred to as Squidgygate. Gilby had referred to Diana as Squidgy on the tapes and declared his love for her, suggesting that they were lovers. Although the two claimed that there was nothing concrete, the tapes introduced another scandal into Diana's already sullied life. Diana also had a relationship with Oliver Hoare, a friend of Charles and a dealer in art. Diana was reported to have become deeply in love with Hoare, and even rumors went that she made dozens of nighttime visits to his home. Hoare was married, though, and while some believed they had an affair, others believed Diana wanted emotional support. By the mid-1990s, while taking a shot at independence, Diana's name had a train of men attached to it, with heart surgeon Hasnat Khan being one of them. Their affair was possibly the most serious after Charles. Unlike socialites she had previously dated, Khan was very shy. He was dedicated to his medical practice, and his unassuming living style was as far away as one could be from the spotlight. Diana was said to have been drawn to his down-to-earth personality, and even wanted to become a Muslim so that she could marry him. Their romance was under tremendous strain from all the media coverage, and it ultimately broke down. Diana was then one of the best photographed and most discussed women on the planet. Every outing, every glance, every meeting was dissected by the media, and her private life was speculated about in detail. Some saw her as a woman, searching for genuine human connection after years of psychological turmoil, while others saw her as a heartbreaker or a woman who could not find stability. Regardless of the story, Diana's presence in the public never diminished, and her private life was always intriguing to the public everywhere in the world. When Charles and Diana's relationship started to fall apart in the public eye, the royal household reportedly attempted repeatedly to intervene and facilitate some arrangement. There were reports of a flurry of correspondence between top royals, administrators, and even Charles and Diana herself. It is known that Queen Elizabeth had urged both sides to try to find a way to make things respectable and avoid further scandal. Prince Philip wrote a letter as well, reportedly to Diana, imploring that she stayed for the sake of the family and the children, William and Harry. Diana, however, was sorely pained by all that had happened, particularly by Charles's affair with Camilla. Despite all the interventions, the hurt was too deep to be healed. At this stage, Diana was battling multiple challenges. The persistent spotlight of the press was suffocating, and she had photographers waiting around at every corner. Wherever she went, she could not escape the blinding flash of the cameras, the intrusive questions, and the non-stop gossip about her private life. She struggled on an emotional front as well, being alone despite being one of the world's most popular women. She had lost the trust of the royal family, and although she had fans across the world, she felt alone in her internal battles. Her relationship with her sons continued to be firm, but they too could not save her from the relentless inquisitions that hounded her. The pressures weighed heavy on Diana's mind. She had freely spoken about the psychological suffering caused by her marriage. While Diana sought to recreate herself outside of the restrictive limitations of royalty, she could not escape the fate of her marriage. The efforts at reconciliation did not succeed, and by 1996, Charles and Diana made their divorce final, with a great deal of publicity, as the couple brought an end to their very complicated relationship as perceived by the public. Diana's efforts at moving forward in her life were always confronted with obstacles, even though she was devoted to her philanthropic work. The media followed her day and night, and conspiracy about her relationships, her power, and her position in the world only increased. She was no longer held captive by the role of becoming the future queen, but in so many respects, she was still held captive by the image the world had created of her. Diana's life was cut short tragically and prematurely, on the night of August 31st, 1997, when she was killed in a car accident in the Pont de l'Alma tunnel in Paris. The car she was traveling in was being driven by Henri Paul, who was speeding to get away from the paparazzi. Diana had with her her friend, Dodi Fayed, and their bodyguard, Trevor Rees-Jones. Diana and Dodi perished, while Rees-Jones lived with critical injuries. The news caused a stir all over the world, and millions were left mourning. From the very beginning, facts regarding Diana's death created controversy. Many did not believe that it was simply a car accident and suspected foul play. Rumor websites popped up speculating a royal cover-up and claims that powerful agents tried to silence Diana. They cited her recent humanitarian efforts as motives why she could have been targeted. Others thought that it might be related to the fact that she was dating Dodi Fayed, which might not have aligned with certain royal designs. One issue that continued to fuel such whispers was the circumstances under which Diana was killed, as she was not wearing a seatbelt during the accident. Sarah, Diana's older sister, simply wondered why this would have happened because Diana was always mindful of safety. It did not make sense that on this evening she would have chosen not to wear her seatbelt. Although some experts said a seatbelt could not have saved her in the type of crash that had occurred, others believed it would have made the difference. This small but significant piece of information added to another layer of intrigue to the already unclear circumstances of her death. Even years later, Diana's death remains a subject of speculation and mourning. Official investigations, like the British inquest that concluded in 2008, ruled that she died due to drunk driving by Henri Paul and the aggressive paparazzi chase. But to the majority, the explanations still did not dispel the remaining doubts. They still wonder if there was more to it, if there were conspiracies that were covered up, or if Diana was simply an unfortunate victim of situations beyond anybody's control. Despite all the controversies, Diana's memory is still cherished by millions. She was no ordinary princess. She was a symbol of resilience, compassion, and empathy. Her philanthropic efforts, her ability to connect with the masses, and her capacity to use her popularity for good left a lasting mark. Up to this point, her death anniversaries are marked with tributes and flowers placed outside the door of Kensington Palace, and people still remember the life of the woman who won the hearts of the entire world. She lives on through her sons, William and Harry, but even more so in the many lives she touched before passing away. That brings us to the end of this video. Make sure you like and subscribe, and we will see you in the next one.